in terms of cosmological hierarchy, and it's insanely powerful but kind of easier to grasp than DC and Marvel in a way. The nature of the verse is built around magic and narrative myth mostly. In just the same way DC has its own forces and Marvel is this whole Jungian archetype thing. Alright? So before I start saying anything, it's important to note that terms like planet, moon, and many other things aren't generalized definitions in the verse, but they each have a deep context to it. A planet can be an actual infinite multiverse of its own within this verse, so please pay attention to every detail. The verse starts off with your local multiverse, just like every other powerful verse. This local multiverse is known as Nirn. Before explaining Nirn, how about briefing up what space, planets, moon, sky, magic in the verse, what they really are? What is space in the Elder Scrolls universe? Space is the interpretation of Oblivion, which is black and empty and surrounds the mortal plane. Space is infinite, but it acts just like a planet, in that Oblivion is surrounded by Aetherius. You can see Aetherius by the stars. Now, many of you may not understand that yet, and probably the next few things I'm about to say. So just pay attention, keep them at the back of your mind, and watch till the end. Now, what are planets? The planets are the gods and the planes of the gods, which is the same thing. That they appear as spherical, heavenly bodies are a visual phenomenon caused by mortal mental stress. Since each planet is an infinite mass of infinite size, as yet surrounded by the void of oblivion, the mortal eye registers them as bubbles within the space. Planets are magical and impossible. The eight planets correspond to the 8 divines. They are all present on the dwarven orrery, along with the mortal planet, Nirn. What are moons? Small planets, insofar as one of infinite mass of infinite size can be smaller than another. Planets do have orbits, or at least lunar orbits are perceived to happen by mortals. Moons are regarded by various cultures as attendant spirits of their god planets, or minor gods, or foreign gods. The moons of Nirn are Maser and Secunda. Moons are now represented in the dwarven orrery. The moons are personifications of duality from Lorcan. It's called a multiverse on about 3 occasions. So later on down the line, you know who Lorcan is and is a very powerful being. The planets and moons are infinite too, due to them being magical, metaphysical, and impossible phenomena. This is possible. These are actually planes of existence and not planets as we know. What is the sky? The sky is another visual phenomenon caused by mortal mental stress. The night sky in particular, the sky is as impossible as planets. In essence, when you look into the sky, you look outside the material plane. Now what is magic? Magic in Elder Scrolls is omnipresent and everything within it is built around magic and used in a being's everyday life. Magic is also stated as manipulating reality to your will, which would imply that any form of magic is just reality warping to a minuscule degree, based on how powerful you can do it, based on your existence and transcendence. Right? Now, what is the sun? Magnus is the sun, the largest hole in Oblivion, and the gateway to magic. Magnus was present at the creation of the mortal plane, and in fact, was its architect. Lorcan was its advocate and inspiration. Prehistoric before 2500 start years, that is however they call it, Nirn was a magical place and highly unstable to the first mortals. Magnus then left. Some say in disgust and Oblivion filled in the void with the void. His escape was not easy, and tatters of Magnus remain in the firmament as stars. That is crazy. Yeah, so like It's almost like a very similar thing to Marvel, where like Ra is like this elder god, and everything originates all the stars. It's literally the same thing. So now, to give more context to these, right? The planets and moons are infinite too. Due to them being magical, metaphysical, and impossible phenomena, this is possible. These are actual planes of existence and not planets as we know. The planets are physical manifestations of the eighth divine that they took and thrown away when the war of manifest metaphors ended. They are beyond comprehension. The fact planets are actually planes of existence that each infinite in size and infinite in mass, but seen by mortals as spherical heavenly bodies, as mortals' mind cannot comprehend infinite. There's in fact more planets in Mundus that that are known um, and it's said that some come from Aetherius like meteors. That is impressive. That is insane. That is literally tossing multiverses, infinite multiverses at meteorite. That's crazy. That's crazy. So as for the moons, it's the same as planets, and there's currently known three, right? Which is Master and Secunda and the Dark Moon. This verse is very deep. These concepts aren't even all. Things like stars are gateways to magic, making them very powerful. And then we have constellations, which originate from Magnus. This reminds me of how Marvel has their Earth, right? The Earth isn't just a random planet, but Gaia and transcends creation itself. You have the man of lineages and being the true nexus for all of creation because of egocentric phenomenon. The moon is Khonshu, who is an elder god, and is older than the elder gods, as he is the true elder god on that level of Gaia or more. The sun is Ra, and completely an archetypal being, as the burning light of creation. So it is a similar thing with DC as well. The Elder Scrolls go straight to the point to let you know, unlike Marvel and DC, which requires a lot of reading and intellect and intelligence to know that. These terms are so important because of the Nirn and Mundus. Now, what is Nirn? Nirn is a finite ball of matter and magic made from all the god planets at the beginning of time when Lorcan tricked or convinced or forced the gods to create the mortal plane. Now, Nirn is the mortal plane and the mortal planet, which is the same thing. Its creation upset the cosmic balance. Now, all souls have a vested interest in Nirn, especially Aedra and Daedra, the gods' demons. Right? So the context behind this is just Nirn is a plane of existence, not a planet. It's a higher dimensional construct with its own timelines. That is why I went over those terms so you all can know the extent of what any little thing being said actually means. Nirn has a multi-dimensional axis mundi that connects the heavens to earth. Nirn also has layers to it that are largely unseen and are inaccessible due to most mortals being limited to, to three dimensions or due to the metaphysical nature of these layers. It's been stated by Cygnus that there are at least 2 to 3 temporal dimensions present within Nirn, alluding to extra-temporal axes that view time non-linearly. Nirn also has parallel worlds called adjacent places or shadow realities. These shadows have their own past, present, and future. What this means is that these shadow worlds have their own timelines. The Nirn, in conclusion, is literally just an infinite multiverse with multiple time streams that create multilinear timelines. In other words, an infinite multiverse with infinite universes, aka realities, and these multiverses can contain infinite dimensional constructs that are layered upon each other. Now, I know that is described as finite, but when we're talking about this verse, almost everything else is infinite. So the mortal plane that is clearly stated to have dimensions is considered finite, right? Which would lead us to this conclusion. The Nirn would scale to high 1b or 1a. The gap between high 1b and 1a is very close. Basically, the outer shell of the multiverse which is beyond the infinities being created within. The Nirn is 1A as a cosmological construct, but everything infinite within scales to high 1B. That's pretty much the same with most powerful versions. So now moving on to the Mundus, right? The Mundus houses these so-called planets and moons. Mundus is the mortal plane that was created by the eight divines. Now, Mundus is the mortal plane where the laws and concepts, the Aedra, represent solidly the mortal plane, and it makes it stable, unlike the outer planes like Oblivion or Aetherius. Mundus contains multiple infinities, right? The solar system of Mundus contains planets which are divines. These planets are infinite in size and mass and only appear spherical due to mortal stress, unable to comprehend it. Mundus can also contain 16-dimensional mathematics and infinite higher and lower shadows, where one emanation alone contains infinite depth and impression. The shadows are not exact reflections of light, but reflections into another reality. Mundus also contains the moons of Masir and Secunda, who are the personification of dichotomy or duality, right? Mundus also has barriers known as the towers, which are metaphysical anchors that exist in all of realities at once. And later on, because I'm likely gonna do a part two. This video gets about 20,000 views or something. So these towers are metaphysical anchors that exist in all reality at once. The divines are confirmed to be 40 creational gradients above Nirn, in which all of creation is a subgradient. Using one of the so-called planets within the Mundus, the realm of Akatush, right? Akatush is a non-physical realm that is described as endless looping sand about a story that is simultaneously a part of the tapestry of time, whilst also outside of it. The realm is also described as a myth made manifest. So the context behind these is that the Mundus is basically seen as the mortal higher plane of existence that houses the Nirn and other realms or planets. The Mundus being 16-dimensional isn't referencing to simple mathematical dimensions, as we just established such exist within the Nirn already, but rather its mathematical transcendence between shadow realms or higher planes of reality. In other words, there are 16 higher dimensional realms as they represent the tower, which, as you can see in the scan, refers to higher planes of reality, right? So meaning they just keep transcending infinitely within an aleph smaller, within an aleph of a smaller scale. What is it even called again? Aleph. Hold on. I think it's a smaller transfinite cardinal, right? So within that sense, so till you get to the 16 layers of infinite transcendence. So to put that into power scaling perspective, the Mundus would be high autoversal because the Nirn already is autoversal, viewing it beyond what it contains. Those planets are the realms of the eight divines who created the Mundus, but they were tricked in a way by higher beings, to remain there and make it stable because if it collapses, then it becomes like a chain reaction across creation, very similar to Marvel and DC. Basically, the eight planets there are just very overpowered, high universal realms housed by beings beyond the Nirn and the Mundus itself. This helps better understand the 16-dimensional planes because they are all below the 8 divine. The nature of the 16 dimensions is the extent of the Mundus in terms of transcendence, which max would be high universal. Now, this is more valid as I stated and shown above that the divines are 40 creational gradients above the Nirn, which is above 16 levels of the Mundus. They are almost transparently stronger than the Mundus, which actually makes them tier 0 or low ball, really high into high 1A. Note that the planets' realms are really overpowered. Remember my explanation of Aetherius? Yeah, the moons themselves are still infinitely large, but finite in comparison to the 8 divine realms. Now, Nirn is still weaker than the moons. Even if you want to power stack, the Nirn can perceive the moon. The moon can perceive the planets, but can't contend with them. Same for the planets with the sun, the star, the constellation, and the mundus. It's something to know that these are mostly done through magical transcendence backed up with creation myth. The very standard for Platonic archetype and not concept. They're very two different things. Some may still not grab how big the mundus is. So take our solar system to be to the infinite multiverses per planet, right? Some transcending the other, and many other planets, stars, and constellations are still in our universe. Now, the space of our universe is so vast compared to our solar system, but now the Mundus is infinitely larger than infinitely transcendent multiverses seen as the planets by mortals. That's the same comparison. The transcendence gap or stage is insane. The verse is a clear problem against Marvel and DC at this point, and that is not a joke. To the next segment, this feels like it would just keep getting way stronger because we haven't reached Oblivion yet. Beyond the Mundus, we have quite a complex layered structure called the oceans. Not really beyond the Mundus. I think some people really confuse this, right? The ocean usually is in context to the Nirn, right? Because like it's described, the human mind, for example, right, as we're on Earth, we can only perceive what we can perceive. If we do not know if our planet is as large as a multiverse, our brains would not be able to comprehend it. So that's what they mean. So, like, imagine you're on a boat on the ocean, and almost every 100 kilometers you take, you're moving through different timelines. We are getting there. But the whole ocean thing is not just limited to Nern, actually. It goes across the entire multiverse. Yeah. It's just like in DC that the bleed doesn't actually stop at the orrery of worlds. Most people don't get it. If you read Justice League 2018, you will know what I'm talking about when Mr. Mixie comes in. But that's go check my DC videos. That's a discussion for another day. There's a very similar thing with this as well, right? So that is it. So beyond the Mundus, we have quite a complex layer structure, like I said. So now moving on to the higher dimensions in time. Now, traveling between higher planes of existence requires a liminal bridge, otherwise known as the hypergonal, the hypergonal media. This is generally thought to be a theory because it's generally not possible to travel through planes without an artifact of some kind. Now, Nern sailing to other continents is actually traveling through linear time. I think I need to repeat what I said. Nern sailing to other continents is actually traveling through linear time. So I do not even need to confuse you guys, but that's a very overpowered feat right there. Now, we have transliminal planes, however, do exist and are hard to access. Now, the hypergonal is a fictional word in Elder Scrolls, which is the variable version of diagonal and hyper within the real world. It functions equal or identical to geometric and spatial dimensionality. Right? So look at the scans posted in the shadow part of the Mundus scaling. On Nirn, sailing to other continents is actually traveling through linear time. And that is insane. So let's talk about the dawn era on the time and high dimension. The oceans, they are comprised of memory, a mortal's memory is to be exact. Each continent is actually a different point in time entirely, effectively meaning When you sail to a different continent, you are actually time traveling. There's also some places that exist outside of the concepts of space and time that were a thing in the dawn era, right? So just keep watching, we will get to that section, right? And some places that solely exist in the collective unconscious of certain races. The Dawn Era is a period of timelessness and a phenomenon where all the concepts that gave Mundus its exactness and limitations do not exist. So every other realm outside of the Mundus exists without the concepts of space, time, logic, math, life, and death. To even transcend math and languages, space and time, logic as a whole, is beyond anything even most high ultraversal beings can do. But most people do not even know this because even high ultraversal realms still have time, but it's transcendently multilinear time, right? And they still have mathematical, logical reasoning and all that. They're not really beyond logic. When you're boundless, when you're higher than high ultraversal, not tier zero is a very funny term because there should be something way more than tier zero before tier zero, right? Or whatever. So logic doesn't exist in the dawn era and it's irrelevant to the gods like Now and Julianus. It's the god in the concept of math and logic. It's also reminiscent of the lore text, the ooze, where everything is formless and shape shifting before it was stabilized. In the dawn era, the Aetherius and the Mundus were devoid of math. Space and time do not exist in the dawn era or any of the realms beyond. The vines are everything mortals feel, touch, and see in the Mundus, as the concepts they personify make up the mortal plane. The dawn was a time of formlessness until Euphor took this formless primordial ooze and ordered it, meaning he shaped the ooze and had form and laws, functions to it. That is very overpowered to do that kind of thing. Now, the context really here is that there are realms beyond the Mundus, which concepts as a whole are just irrelevant. They do not exist. We have beings that can shape the dawn era to give the multiverse shape, order, and form as mythical concepts. To travel beyond, you need special ways, as explained. So, of course, you cannot just enter into a completely formless and conceptualless realm. Time works differently. Swimming from continent to continent can literally push you forward in time or backwards. It's quite fascinating. So we're gradually closing up on things, right? The next prominent realm to point out is Oblivion. Now, Oblivion is the void of nothingness, which is a larger infinity that encircles all of Mundus, where higher realms are not subjected to the concept of time, consequences, and eventuality. So Oblivion contains infinite dimensions, each infinite in variation and containing an infinite amount of possibilities, with a mere pocket dimension being a distant Platonic ideal of non-corporeal entities that exist in the soul kern. The residents of the soul kern can freely manipulate its very and its every aspect. They are also suggested to transcend form itself. Again, this is a firm example of Platonic archetype. Platonic concepts and non-Platonic archetypes are really not the same thing. Platonic concepts are usually just metaphorical eidos, right? The theory of forms of something that is intangible that you can use to represent something of a greater magnitude, right? While a Platonic archetype is something that truly goes beyond form. It has to do with every form of how do I put it in a way that would not confuse you? Maybe I'll describe it down below. But yes, just basically something that transcends the idea of forms on a Platonic scale, really. And Platonism is beyond space and time in its actuality. So yeah. What else? So Oblivion So, oblivion in nature is the concept of change, manifesting all possibilities, impossibilities, understanding, and misunderstanding. There are unlimited islands, which are realms, that are contained by infinite spatial dimensions. However, it's possible that this is just another pitifully limited interpretation of what oblivion actually is. You see, these are actual spatial dimensions. The island part is a reference to realms present in oblivion. There are also other examples of oblivion being a higher dimensional expanse, such as the text liminal bridges, which states that hypergonal media is necessary to travel through Mundus and Oblivion, and to open portals between both realms that last more than an infinitesimally small amount of time. So hypergonal is a niche term that refers strictly to higher spatial axes. And this should be noted that whenever a mortal describes Oblivion, it is a pitifully limited interpretation of it. Even blades of grass are just a memory of grass, and your mind playing tricks on you to comprehend them and the infinite churning chaos around you. This is basically kind of a conversation. Sometimes I mention the conversations together, to give more context to what I'm saying. Because it's a video game, right? Getting all this is not easy at all. Oblivion, right, is suggested to have infinite hierarchies with infinite realms and goons that manage to exert or influence those realms and other people, with the top of these hierarchies being the Daedric lords and the Daedric princes, right? They are confirmed to be countless Daedric lords, and they are implied to conceptually personify their titles as concepts or Platonic archetypes, right? Daedras are not physical, they are living conglomerations of hyper angles, right? They are conglomerations of hyper angles, even of further Dremora for that matter, right? This would mean all forms of Daedra are inherently of high existence. Man, I read that weird. Speaking of the Daedra, they are completely beyond causality, duration, time, consequences. Both Daedra, the princes and demi-princes, and most likely lower-ranking Daedras, and Aedra, so Daedra, the Aedras, they exist in a timeless and spaceless world where all things are happening at once. Daedric bodies are formed from pure chaos and concepts. They are metaphysical and abstract, and only adhere to a specific pattern to converse or interact with mortals. The concept of life and death means nothing to anyone other than the mortals. Beings here are manifest metaphors, right? And abstract beings, and are metaphorical and metaphysical in nature. This is starting to also look more like Jungian archetype, but this is still strongly Platonic archetype. They're almost no different, just some things vary. But Jungian archetypes are way stronger though. So beings like Mehrunes Dagon are the literal concept of destruction, revolution, change, and ambition. Some realms are made of pure thought and potential, since Daedra are incapable of creating things out of nothing like the Aedra. They instead craft their domains and servants by harnessing the raw possibilities of Oblivion and pressing their intent upon the chaotic creature, as to transmute it from a conceptual, dormant state into an active, concrete one. Whereupon it assumes the form of particles known as Daedrons, which are then used to sculpt planes over the landscape of Oblivion. This demonstrates that Oblivion is a realm of pure concept and abstraction, and not physical in any sense. Another thing that might demonstrate this is that some beings in this realm are called distant Platonic ideals. Like I've been saying all this while. It isn't bound by any form of space or time other than the idealistic space. It's even called spaceless. The power of Oblivion is stated to be an undimensioned phenomenon, meaning unbound by dimensionality. Oblivion manifests all the possibilities and impossibilities, validating all misunderstandings and understandings. All concepts and theories are presented within Oblivion, within a dormant state of deodorants, that they can solidify with their willpower. This is also why Oblivion is called the debris of all possibilities. Now, all these, as you can see here, the scans, but let me explain the context of all these, right? Like I've been doing all this well. There isn't much to say here that this is too overpowered. Beings beyond realms of high gods that are formless and all kind of overpowered concepts given to them are just nothing compared to Oblivion. It is pure nothingness in which its debris caused everything below. To point this out, Oblivion is layered into like extraversal or whatever they call it nowadays, or really high, like high universal plus, right? There's a realm called Clockwork City, which is just the replica of the Mundus, so I'm not really gonna go there. On to the next big thing, right? We have the Aetherius. Yes, we are entering the big boy domain. You see, it filters through the veil of Oblivion from laminar and luminar. You see, perforations left by the architect Magnus and the Magna G as they fled Mundus, bringing light and magic to mortals. Now, Magnus and Magna G are stars, right? The sun and very important stars. So the stars there make up the constellation, which are governed by a Domion planet. Man, these names are just. And a metaphorical absolute within a universe itself. Now, the stars are the link to Aetherius. Each star links to a different realm. Just as there are a myriad of realms within the Aetherius, there's also a myriad within the Aetherius plane, which each star leading into one. I don't think you guys really understand that. So, the Aetherius realm, right? It's infinite in its totality. Then, there are stars, planets within it that are also infinite. So just like it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. Like it's really overpowered, right? And each of the stars connect to the rest of creation, leading to Aetherius, right? Now, the Aetherius plane is the home to the original spirits, gods, and demons, in which their true forms are boundless forms, devoid of concept of identity. Once Akatosh formed as time, the spirits became aware and recognized themselves and began to crystallize, in which the others were ideas, concepts, and emotions. Lorcan, one of the strongest, like I told you earlier, pay attention to Lorcan. One of the strongest is the concept of space, right? He's the very concept of space, including Oblivion and above. And Akatosh, and he's Akatosh's brother, right? Now, Akatosh is time itself. So, it's the birthplace of magic and sustains all life. It's called the real world compared to everything below. That's crazy. So, Aetherius is so much more higher than Oblivion. Is not even funny at all, right? So, this would be high extraversal. Is really high into high autoversal plus. Now we have the Aurbis, or the Aurbis. Now there are unknown, constructed realms beyond the Aetherius, which was confirmed. Now you see, the Aetherius is the first layer of this realm, aka the entirety of the multiverse. I just explained is one layer. It's insane. That is just one layer. All of creation is like a wheel, with Mundus being the hub and Oblivion being the spokes that makes up the wheel. So the Aurbis is the foundation, creating possibilities and patterns. Although there is a concept of wheels within wheels and worlds, aka infinite wheels, one of the wheels being like a telescope that stretches all the way back to the eye of Anu with Padomay is innumerable along its infinite walls. This suggests and implies infinite views. What's impressive is that one of those walls, right, stretches way back on an infinite scale. And if you look at the map right here, you see what I'm talking about. Look at those rings round. Yeah, one of that is more powerful than the full thing you're seeing within. So, and there are infinite number of that. And one of that is the first layer. So I don't even, that's why I said this video is gonna have a part 2 because it's insane. This is really getting to the level of Marvel. Like, it's really close. I'm pretty sure it's probably BTC by now, and that is not a joke. So as I was saying, right, although it suggested that Lorcan and Akatosh only brought stability to the lower views, not the greater views, as the greater views are infinitely greater. And remember, these two brothers are the very concept of space and time, but they could only bring stability to the lower views, and they instructed, if I remember clearly, the 8th divine to also bring that same stability to the Mundus. It's insane, right? So as the greater views are infinitely greater but have no definite shape or stability and are instead hedonic in nature, being a constant state of chaos and change. This is why, despite the many views, this is the prime multiverse of the Elder Scrolls, which has been given form and order. 100% correct. It is described that turning the wheel sideways is viewing the tower. The tower is the letter I, which is the name of God. Like I said, in part 2, I'll go into all this tower and all that. Now, to observe the tower, it requires you to transcend the concept of duplexity, antithesis, and trouble itself. To dissolve your senses everywhere and nowhere at once, to become I, a boundless state. The state is known as CHIM. Basically, all this is saying is you become I am that I am. Almost what you think God represents. That is insane. So CHIM users are granted non-spatial space where they can attempt to make the dream a state of nirvana with lucid dreaming, sleeping like powers. You see here, this is some Azathoth type shit. That is not cool at all. This is some Azathoth type shit. Now, it's a fusion of Anu and Padomay's intersection. So the verse is high extraversal or really high into high autoversal plus. I do not want to give it the tier 0 yet because it really hasn't gotten there. But you can argue it's there already. So I'll be stopping here for now. If you want me to go beyond the main multiverse and include many other details, then make sure this video gets at least 20,000 views and 1,000 likes. I will also be selling the script of the videos, so anyone who is willing to buy it's going for $100. If you want to use it for anything, you want to use it for scaling or your own personal research, you'll have all the scans and everything right there. So just comment down below under my creator's comments. I do. It's literally that simple. So for now, that is all. I really hope you guys enjoy this. I'm back, and I actually miss doing this. If you found this video informative, please do to make sure you like, share, subscribe. You could go create TikTok pages and start posting it for it to go viral. I mean, that would help. And who knows? But yeah, please do to subscribe. Thank you.